Okay. So, this is outside of a where are we now thing. This is the last chapter of the book. It is a story that I think should be told, a story that is hard to tell, and a story that affects a lot of people. And a story that can't be told by the main character. So it's with that, and why it was important to write this and put it in the book is because of the people involved in how this plays out. And if anyone ever at this point in the listening or reading or following along has wondered why I could want to write and surround myself with people who are like this, or you are one of those people, you're about to find out. This is going to get really choppy in editing, but let's see if we can do it. The title of this section of the book is entitled 17 Months Later, Forever Young. Youth's like diamonds in the sun, and diamonds are forever. Tuesday, December 2nd, 2003, after a day at college, Putman and I had decided to go to the townhouse apartment for some quick games of Mordheim. We'd written up some warbands, threw on a wrestling video, and began pulling models out when Sarah came home, and she was not happy at all. "What happened?" I asked as she came upstairs. "The choir director's an asshole," she said. "He went on some rant today about not wanting to take us on tour this year." She threw her backpack down into her room and popped her head back out. "I called Brian, he's going to come over," she said. "I know you're angry. It'll work out. He's not dumb enough to cancel tour," I said, and threatening it is a good way to piss off the choir and parents so he'll realize he's an idiot. A few minutes later, Sarah's boyfriend Brian arrived, and they hung out in her room while Putman and I continued to game. My mom hadn't been feeling well, so we decided to forego dinner and she went to bed. My dad was laying down downstairs, and I was off for a meeting of my small group communications class at about 8 that night, so I figured I'd grab something on the way in. At a little bit before 6, Sarah and Brian came out of her room. "We're going to go get something to eat, probably drive around," she said. "There might be some Christmas lights up, and that'll help." "Okay, I probably won't be here when you get back, so I'll see you tomorrow before school," I responded. She nodded. "Okay, love you, big brother." "I love you too, Mouse," I responded. Sarah and Brian were downstairs and out the door, and Putman and I finished up our game and watched a bit more wrestling before packing up the models for the evening. "Tomorrow?" Putman asked as we stepped out of the townhouse as I put my wallet in my back pocket. "You bet," I responded. We exchanged a brotherly handshake and hug, and he walked to the apartment he shared with his mom and stepdad, which was actually just across the street on the other side of our apartment complex. I walked to my car, a little light blue 1994 Ford Escort hatchback I named Belle, my first taste of vehicular freedom, and started her. 80s music blared as I rolled down the windows, and I threw a notebook into my front passenger seat and pulled out of the parking lot. I headed for Mesa Community College, driving the side streets because I hate driving the freeway, and it gave me more time to listen to music, and I arrived 45 minutes earlier than the rest of my group because, well, some things never change. After our meeting, it was close to about 10 when the group headed out, but one of our members had just gotten out of work and called the cell phone of another, saying she was on her way. "I've got nothing to do and nowhere to go," I said. "I'll wait around and fill her in." When she arrived, I explained what our group project was going to be. We were all going to do like assorted fears, and she had an idea of where she wanted to go with it. Just before 11, we headed out. I climbed into the car, turned it on, rolling down the windows. I took the scenic route home. Because again, since it was December in Mesa, it was nice out. I stopped by a Wendy's to grab some dinner. Driving through, the attendant working the window and I talked about the weather, and she handed me my Coke, my burger order, and I drove around a little bit longer. I was in no rush to get home. I finally drove up past the townhouse apartments a little closer to midnight. As I did, my dad was standing outside. Shit. He fell asleep before I left. He must have forgot I was meeting my group, I said. I didn't have a cell phone, so it made sense he stayed up. And then, I saw Blaine with him. He called Blaine, trying to find me. I thought, great, this should be fun. I parked the car, rolled up the window, grabbed the bag of food and my soda, and as I stepped out of my car, my dad stood waiting for me, having walked to the side parking lot with Blaine. I'm sorry, I said. I went and met with my group from class. You were asleep. I should have left a reminder. Matt, he started. Yeah, I know. I looked at Blaine, and Blaine wasn't smiling. He didn't make a joke. He was stoic. His face caught me off guard, and I turned back to my dad. Matt, there was an accident, he said. What? Sarah and Brian were in an accident tonight, he said, and his voice got so low. Sarah was killed. Blaine reached for the bag of food, but I held on. My eyes darted to Blaine, then Dad. Wait, what? When? I asked. The police came by at about 9, Dad said. They said the accident happened at 6:30. She left the house at like 6, I replied. That doesn't make any sense. Blaine now grabbed the bag of food from me. Bro, you need to come inside, he urged. Yeah. My arms went cold. I opened the door to the townhouse and it was like a war zone. From the kitchen I saw movement. My mom screamed and walked up to me, sobbing and hugging me. My baby, she exclaimed. I hugged my mom and noticed 2 of her chaplain co-workers sitting in the living room, one on the couch and one at the computer. She's gone. Putman was there too, and he was the next one to walk up as my dad walked in. We just saw her, I said. I know, Putman replied. Where? I asked, and I turned to face the entire room. Where was she killed? 40th and Pecos, Blaine said. Wait. I sighed. I knew the intersection, and so did Blaine. It was where we always started our trips down Pecos Road. Are you fucking serious? Blaine nodded. How? I asked. They're not sure. Police were still getting statements, but the guy might have run a red light. They T-boned Brian's truck. Sarah was, my mom started. Sarah was the point of impact from the truck, my dad finished. And he and my mom hugged each other. It would have been instant, I heard another voice. I'm going down there, I said matter-of-factly. Matt, no, you can't go down there. They won't let you on the scene, my mom blurted out. And Putman and Blaine stepped in front of the door. Guys, you have to let me go, I said. I'll go right through you if I have to. Putman and Blaine braced themselves, and Putman nodded. We know. I surged forward and each grabbed an arm to stop me. Instead, I slammed them both backwards, fighting to get out of the front door. I look back at it now, and I know what it was. Sure, it's adrenaline. But it was something else. Something was leaving from deep in my soul and in my heart. It was the last moment I had of being a big brother. As of that moment, I was no longer a big brother. I wasn't a sibling. I was an only child. Putman and Blaine braced again, trying to hold me back, and my parents pleaded with me not to go. They all knew what would happen. I would go down to the scene and I would look for the person who killed my sister. I was inches from the door, and try as they might, Putman and Blaine couldn't hold me. I was getting free. Nothing and no one was going to stop me. I was almost there. And I felt a hand on my back, and it was followed by a hug from behind. Matt, I am so sorry. Meg. I stopped. Meg gripped tighter. Blaine and Putman let go of my arms, and I turned around, and Meg gave me another hug, and Blaine and Putman followed, putting their arms over me. Zan and Gabby are on their way, Putman said. I'm gonna call Emily later, Meg added. What do you need right now? I don't know, I said. That's okay. Okay, that's okay, Meg repeated. There was a bit of silence for a minute, and I hugged my mom and dad. I was angry, so completely and totally angry. It wasn't fair, not this way. Sarah was the one that had so much going for her. What about Brian? I asked. Still alive at the hospital, one of the chaplains said. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my keys, and I handed them to Blaine. If I leave tonight, you're driving, I said, and he nodded. I turned to Putman. Top left desk drawer. Putman nodded. My knife. I had no intentions, but I wanted to be sure. When Putman came down, he gave me another nod. Do you want to sit down? Meg asked, and I shook my head. My mom and dad had gone upstairs to Sarah's room, and I could just hear the anguish coming from them. All of us grimaced. The most heartbreaking sound you can hear is the parent who has lost a child. I stepped outside, followed by Blaine, Putman, and Meg. As we did, a car rolled up outside and parked at the curb. Meg walked down, and I could see Cody pop out. Right behind him was another car. Zan and Gabby got out, running up to me. Gabby gave me the hug first, and then Xandar. We didn't think we were going to be able to stop you, Putman said, so I called for backup. I nodded. It's a good call. As Cody walked up, we went over what had happened, and Cody offered to go down to the scene. No one thought it would be a great idea for me to go, and I, at least at this point, did relent. I knew I had to stay at the house for my parents, and Putman offered to go to the scene too. He would tell me what he saw, and he and Cody climbed into the car and took off. Zan and Gabby joined us to walk back into the house, giving hugs to Mom and Dad when they came down the steps. As my mom's coworkers continued to talk to my folks, my friends and I went outside on the patio. Putman called at about 9:30, Blaine said. Your parents called him first and he came over. Yeah, he called me right after, Meg added. And then us, Zan said. He said something that you were at school and didn't have a phone, Blaine continued. I got here at about 10, so did Meg. We just didn't know when you were going to be back. You waited here? I asked. Of course we did, Meg replied. When we got here, all Putman said was Sarah was killed and you didn't know, and that you'd be coming home to it, Blaine continued. Putman knew you'd go directly to the scene and you'd start swinging. He asked if I thought we could stop you, and I told him no, we couldn't, and so we hoped more people could help. Thanks for being here, I said. Wouldn't be anywhere else, Blaine responded, and Meg, Zan, and Gabby nodded. Putman and Cody would return a little while later, and my dad would go to the scene. When Cody and Putman got back, we were still milling about outside. You don't want to go down there, Cody said. Matt, man, I'm so sorry. Are people still there, I asked. A few, Putman responded. Cody said he'd be by the next day if we needed anything, give him a call, and said goodnight to Meg before leaving. A lot of stuff has moved, but you don't want to go down there, bro, Putman said. It's all just horrible, though. I walked straight into the street and let out a howl, staring at the sky. You fucking killed my sister, huh? I shouted heavenward. And you're gonna hide from me? Rage had taken over. I wanted a fight. And all the ministers and priests and everything will say some bullshit to try and make it sound okay, but I know it's fucking bullshit. Where are you, huh? You got a whole lot of miracles thousands of years ago, but not a single fucking thing to do right now, do you? Matt, get out of the road, Blaine yelled, but I shook my head. I want the guy who killed my sister, or I want an answer to why she had to die, I fired back. Not mad at anyone there, but I was furious at the universe. And it seems to me whatever higher power may, or you know what, may not exist, seems to be scared to answer that question. As a car came down the road, I sidestepped it as it blew past me. You're gonna have to try better than that, I said through clenched teeth, still looking up. Matt, Putman started, but then he stopped. He knew I had to get this out. You took my sister from me, I said bitterly. I put my hands in my pockets. And if I'm ever in the same room with the guy that did it or the people who let him get away with it, I will tear them fucking apart. And if you aren't gonna talk to me now, you don't get to talk to me then. I walked out of the road and back to the apartment and my group. Meg put her arm around me and we all walked in. I was surprised at my own anger and bitterness. My mind was racing. Matt, what do you want to drink? Blaine asked. What? I asked. We're going to go get something to drink, Putman said. We'll be right back, but what do you want? I knew what they were doing. They were trying to get me to focus, trying to give me something else to think of in the second. Your choice, I said. They nodded and stepped out the door. Zan and Gabby sat at the table. My parents were now talking to Mom's coworkers, and Meg sat me down on the couch. She took a seat next to me and held my hand. We can just sit here, she said. I nodded. Blaine and Putman returned after a bit, and I always figured they went to the scene together. Blaine handed me a soda, having found Mellow Yellow, a flashback to my Midwest childhood. A childhood with Sarah. And I found a bit of internal humor in it, the weird things like that in times of trauma and crisis. Okay, I said finally. You guys should rest up. Thanks for being here. We all agreed that even if we weren't going to sleep, we would try and rest up. Blaine took the recliner, Putman sat on the couch, my parents floated between Sarah's room and downstairs, sometimes separately and sometimes together. Putman called Jen and she would be there in the morning, and finally I went upstairs to my room, and Meg followed. If you're tired, you can have the bed, I said, sitting in my chair. I'm not tired. Meg sat on the bed, then laid down, putting her hand out for mine. I might doze off, but I'm gonna try not to. And if I do and you need me, wake me up. I will, I said. I told Cody I'll be here tonight, and if you need me after that, okay? Thanks, Meg. After a few hours, the house was a bit quieter. My parents still had moments, and those sounds still haunt me. It was about 5 in the morning, and I was sitting at my desk when I heard my mom call from downstairs. Matt, Matt, she called. I bolted out of my room, and Meg followed right behind me. As we landed on the bottom floor and into the living room, everyone there had been transfixed on the TV. The early morning local news had pictures and videos of the scene. Of broken glass, and Brian's truck having been knocked off the road and into a ditch, breaking a barbed wire fence. Of the impact point and knowing Sarah had been sitting there, I knew then it was instant. She hopefully never even saw it coming. I controlled it, but my anger flared, and I could see it in Blaine and Putman's face, too. In the abstract, in hearing that there's an accident happening, it's one thing, To see the aftermath of it on the screen was another. I wasn't hiding it. Even if it wasn't realistic, it was there. I should have kept her safe. I wanted it to be me instead of her. The news moved on to another story, and the weather, and commercials, and we all stayed looking at the screen. My mom started to cry, and so did my dad. Blaine, Putman, and Meg all looked at me, and I had my fists clenched. If I ever found the guy. I have to figure the morning out, I said after a while. What about it? Putman asked, and my parents looked over. Someone's going to need to go to the school, I said. Sarah's preschool people and the choir and her work. Matt, we're going to call the office in the morning, my mom said. Okay, but I'm still going, I said. It has to be me. Matt, it doesn't have to, Blaine responded. I could feel the weight on my heart with my very next sentence. I was her brother. If they're going to hear about it, it has to be from me. We contemplate eternity beneath the vast indifference of heaven. The next morning I was online trying to get a hold of Ashley. Sometimes she would jump on Instant Messenger, we would chat before she went to school and I went to college, and she jumped online. I typed out that I needed to talk to her, but she said she was still getting ready to go, and I told her to call me. She didn't want to at first, and then I told her it was important, so she did, and the phone went off. What is it, Matt? She asked. Ashley, listen, last night there was an accident, I said. Brian and Sarah were in an accident. What? She asked. Ashley. Sarah didn't make it, I said. There was silence. Wait, what? Sarah's gone, I said. Brian's in a coma. I'm coming to the school. I'll see you then, was all she had to say. I hung up the phone and took a deep breath. I gotten dressed, and Blaine had handed me my keys, and I put them in my pocket. I grabbed my wallet. Meg grabbed her purse. I'm coming, she said. Me too, Blaine followed. Fuck, yeah, me too, Putman added in. No arguing. I called them this morning, my dad said. They know you're on your way. I nodded, and we decided to drive over to Mountain Point, even though it was so close, because once done, I would go to Sarah's work. Meg drove with me. Blaine and Putman went in Blaine's truck. As we pulled into the parking lot and turned off our cars, I climbed out and opened the door for Meg. She put her hand in mine as Blaine and Putman joined us. We began walking up to the front office, and I could see a figure come out from the side door by the performing arts wing, the same door I held open for Diana and others for years. It was Mr. Werner. Matt, I'm so sorry, he said, putting a supportive hand on my shoulder. I know why you're all here. We were told you were coming. A counselor will be coming to the auditorium. Anything you need, please let me know. The auditorium and choir room are already unlocked, so wherever you need to be. Thanks, Mr. Werner, I said, and he walked us up to the door, opening the door for us as we stepped in. We walked into the auditorium, and I jumped up on the stage, foregoing the ramp, and sat down at the piano that sat in the middle of the stage. The risers were up, as choir holiday concert was planned for the end of the week. David D., Corey, Ashley, Kelsey, and others began to file into the auditorium. I could see Ashley in tears, and Putman, Blaine, and Meg started to spread out. As the choir filtered in, I stood up from the piano. Okay, everybody. Hi, I began, putting my hands in my pockets. I don't know who knows what, so I'll just start with this. Last night, Sarah and her boyfriend went for a drive, and while they were out, they were hit by a speeding truck. Brian is in a coma. Sarah was killed at the scene. Some had known or heard. There were gasps from others and tears. I don't know what you know or what you don't, so I'm here to answer any questions you have. David was the first one to ask. Matt, why you? Why are you here? I wanted you to hear it from me, I said. I know a lot of you. I was her brother. You were her friends. You are my friends. So I wanted to be here for you. A school counselor had walked in and Blaine and Putman began talking with her. We'll be doing a memorial. I'll let you know. All know when that will be, I said. Do you want us to sing? A voice called out. That's the plan. Anyone who wants to, I said. A murmur of volunteer voices came forward. I don't know where your director is, but he knows I'm going to be here pretty much for all of Downbeat's time and into a cappella. So like I said, whatever you guys may want or need. I need to go to the preschool and tell them, though, and then I'll be right back. I hopped off the stage and the guidance counselor waved me over, introducing herself. Do you want to come by my office before you leave? She asked. I want you to help them, I said. I am okay. Right now. I may not be later, but right now I'm okay. She nodded and I told Blaine and Megan Putman I was heading to the preschool. I'll be right back. I walked the hallways of Mountain Point, filling with students, but it felt silent and lonely. Teachers who'd known me from a year and a half before caught me in the hallway to offer their condolences. I saw Mrs. Cam, who stopped me immediately with a hug. When I walked into the preschool where Sarah helped teach, I told her fellow student teachers, along with the teachers of the program. They offered to share with me any photos of Sarah and asked if it was okay to approach the subject with the kids, and I agreed. After a few minutes, I returned to the auditorium and everyone was sharing stories. Ashley gave me a hug. Matt, oh my God, she said, squeezing me. I know, I said. Can I come over? She asked. Of course, I responded. When we left the school, Meg grabbed a ride with Putman and Blaine, and they said they would try and pick up some breakfast and meet me back at the townhouse. I nodded, telling them I just needed a half an hour and I'd be home. They headed out and I went to the opposite direction, going to Sarah's work, a Chuck E. Cheese pizza where she worked as a party host. After telling them what happened, I drove my car to work, still working at Fry's, but now as Gabby's replacement doing Kids Corner childcare, and I saw my department manager and store manager. Hey, do you guys have a second? I asked, walking in. Sure, my manager, Raina, said. What is it? The store manager, Bobby, asked as we stepped into a side office. Okay, I said. So I may not be able to work this weekend. I don't know if you saw the news at all, but there was an accident down the street here. Yeah, Bobby replied. My sister was in the accident. She was the one that was killed, I responded. Take all the time you need, Bobby said. We'll handle everything else. Okay. Thanks. Thank you, I replied. I'll let you know how things go. Thanks a lot. I walked out of the store into my car. Unlocking it and climbing in, I wasn't ready to go home. I sat there in the quiet, looking out of the window. I knew I had to go home. People were there and waiting. Family was coming in. My parents were devastated. They spent most of their time either silent or wailing from Sarah's room. I was in my brain, building myself up for what I would walk back into. And I was almost there, but I didn't move. After fighting it for so long, now I needed it. I needed time. And I felt a nagging in the back of my head. So I started the car and I turned down the road. I rolled down the windows and I let the wind pass through the car and put my arm out the window to feel the cool breeze. I listened to music, passed a few streets, and then pulled off to the side of the road. I closed my eyes for a moment. You're not invited here. Not now, I said, directing that heavenward. No one knows I went there, but I had to. And I had to do it alone. got out of the car and I crouched down, looking into that ditch. I put my hands in the gravel, dirt, and broken glass. Right there, at the intersection of 40th Street and Pecos Road, where Sarah had been killed roughly 14 hours before. 30 minutes after I told my little sister I loved her, unknowingly, for the final time. And I screamed. Your little piece of heaven turns to dark. When I returned home, people had started to arrive. Meg, Blaine, and Putman were back, and Zand and Gabby were there. Jen had arrived a few minutes before I got there. She gave me a big hug. Blaine motioned there was breakfast. My parents mentioned that things were getting in motion for Sarah's memorial. I did not want to tell anyone I went to the scene, so I discussed the idea of choir people singing, and my parents agreed, and it gave me a project to work on. My parents gave me a lot of hugs that day, and as the morning started to get about midday, our townhouse had an open-door policy. Anyone who wanted to come by was welcome, and anyone who needed to step out had an open invitation to come back. I need to get a few things, and then I'm going to call Cody, but I'm probably going to come back, and I'll stay tonight if that's okay, Meg said. And I nodded, and she gave me a hug. A little while after Meg left, there was a knock on the door, and as I sat at the dining room table, I got up first, motioning to Blaine, Putman, and Zan that I got it. I opened the door, and before it was even halfway open, I was gripped in a bear hug by Emily as she stepped in. Matt, she said, and that's all she had to do. I'm so sorry. It sucks, I responded, and she squeezed me harder. Kate was right behind her, and Kate hugged me next. It just really sucks, I said. Emily and Kate gave my mom a hug, and once done, Emily moved to my dad, and my dad put his hand up to stop her. Not yet, he said, and Emily stopped. Oh, okay, she said. In less than a day's worth of heartbreak, it was what hit me the hardest other than the initial news. My dad stood there, and he looked at Emily, who had always meant so much to my family. The love my parents had for her, and my dad let out a sigh, and I saw his shoulders sag, and he nodded. Okay, I'm ready, he said. Emily hugged him, and I watched my dad melt. Emily gave him the hug he needed, and when they were done, Kate was next. We all sat down, and my dad stepped out of the room, and we all went over what we knew with Kate and Emily. Blaine had told Crystal because they had started to date, and she would try and be by later. Blaine had also reached out to others, like Katie and Pam, who had reached out to Becky. My parents had called Putman first. Putman called Blaine, Meg, and Xandar. He called Jen, and had also started to call others from the graduating class, like Andrea, Danielle, and others. It was beginning to move through the friend group, and quickly. We told Jackie, Kate said. She said she'd be by later if that's okay. Yeah, of course, I said, nodding. Right now it looks like the memorial will be next Monday, I said. Sarah was an organ donor, and Mom's work friends were looking into all that to see how that went. Sarah wanted to be cremated, so we'll be doing that too. Anyone who wants to will sing Amazing Grace at the memorial. We're in, Blaine said. I can get the music, Kate replied. I can go get it right now and bring it back. That would be great, I responded. Thank you. It felt good. We had all started to get moving, and in between things we were catching quick naps. Blaine fell asleep in the chair, Putman on the couch, and when he woke up, we gave him a bit of grief about his snoring. I couldn't sleep, though. So I opened up a blank document on my computer and began to write. I worked on a screenplay. Not that I had a specific idea in mind. I just needed to write. I'd take breaks, but I'd keep writing. As it got into the evening, more calls were coming into the house. My grandparents called. They would be on their way from Iowa. My aunt on my dad's side would be joining them. Food was being delivered, and we ate when and what we could, but it was still just ground zero. Our house was a hive of activity. Kate, Emily, and Jackie had returned and brought music with them. I'd been fielding phone calls from Sarah's friends and mine. With the sheet music in hand, I grabbed my keys and a handful of change. I'm going to go up to Fry's and make copies of this. I'll be right back. There was a bit of response of voices all at once. Volunteers to go do it, but I shook my head. It'll take 20 minutes. I'll drive, Jackie said, her purse over her shoulder and her keys in her hand. Come on, let's go. We didn't talk much in the few short minutes to get to Fry's, and when we walked in, I was bombarded. A mom who I was friendly with, whose sons I watched, saw me come in and gave me a hug. Cashiers and courtesy clerks and stockers stopped what they were doing to give a hug or to check on me. I walked up to where the copier was by customer service and pulled out a handful of change. I put the sheet music in and got ready, and Linda, the sweet woman who worked customer service, handed me the employee key. Do not put your money in there, she said. Make what you need. Linda, there's going to be a lot, I said, fumbling with the change. I wasn't focused. Matt, she said, touching my arm. Make what you need. I nodded. I had a lump in my throat, and I started running off copies of the sheet music. She handed me a series of paper clips and folders to put the music in, and in between copies I kept talking with coworkers. It had gotten around the store, whether from managers, the news, and it became known I was there, so people had started to come up. I thanked Linda and everyone, gathered up the copies with Jackie, and we walked out. We got into her car and she started it. We'll take a longer way back, Jackie said, and I nodded. We talked. We didn't talk about Sarah. We talked about us. About how things had gone my senior year, her junior. Of awkwardness, hurt feelings, and maybe leaving things worse than they needed to be. We took the opportunity to iron some things out. Maybe we weren't going to be close friends. Maybe our time in each other's lives would be short, but we could at least try and leave them a little bit more positive. When we got back and parked, I thanked her for driving and the talk, and we walked back in together. We handed out music to everyone, and Blaine had mentioned Crystal's parents had already offered up their house for rehearsals. We decided we'd give it a day to see who would be interested, then go from there. Kate would play piano for rehearsals, choir members would reunite, and anyone who loved Sarah or I was welcome. We're gonna need a director, Blaine said. We have one, I replied. And that's what we did. No lies at all. Just one more tale. About the captain. And the kid. Thanks for coming, boss, I said as Wendy walked through the door at Crystal's. I'm honored you would ask me, she said as she gave me a hug. I'm sorry, Matt. Wendy walked in, and the choir group that had amassed for the rehearsal all quickly had a chance to say hi and catch up. The choir that would practice would be a multi-generational one. Blaine, Zan, Putman, David, and I would sing side by side with David D., Corey. Meg, Emily, Jackie, and Kate would sing together with Ashley, Francesca, Diana, Kelsey, and other juniors and seniors who knew Sarah but maybe never really got to know them. Some of us may have even been far removed from our formal choir days, but we picked up right where we left off. Wendy had actually stayed at Mountain Point 1 year after I graduated, then after Putman's class graduated, moved on to a different school. So she still had a lot of rapport with us, and everything felt natural. A few run-throughs of the songs, and we took a quick break as we had some food and drinks. Wendy made her rounds to talk to everybody. We got back to singing a bit more, and after a few more repetitions, everyone was comfortable with their parts and singing. We didn't worry about mesmerizations. We'd keep the sheet music with us, and we'd wrapped up everything. Wendy raised her hand. There's a solo here at the beginning, she said. Matt, do you want someone to take that? I nodded. I do. Who do you want to have sing it? Wendy asked. I didn't even hesitate. You. There was a pause, and Wendy looked surprised. What, really? I nodded. Yep. Oh, wow, okay, she said. As everyone continued to talk a bit, Wendy and I stepped off to the side, and she had a confused look on her face. Why me? She asked. Us, I responded. You and me, if that's okay. I don't want anyone to feel pressure about it, and I knew you would be great. No one else was going to direct this group, and I wanted you and me to sing it together. Wendy gave me a hug. It would be my honor, Matt. It's true. I didn't want anyone else to feel pressured by it. I knew I could have picked anyone and they would have done it. I also knew that it would be a bit of my own way as tribute to Sarah, so I wanted it to be a duet with me. As weird as it felt, there was one person in that group that I'd never really been able to sing with, and that was Wendy. As much as Wendy and I had done together, there was something missing. And I felt Sarah's hand in making this decision, that maybe she was making sure we got to do one last thing together. You almost had your hooks in me, didn't you, dear? As the week came to an end and we waited the following Monday for Sarah's memorial, the group had started to go home. They'd done so much, and I was so thankful, and I could never blame them. Our house was a pinpoint of sadness, so calls would still come, they would still visit, but it was me and my parents. Meg had stayed a couple of nights, but had gone back home. She called. She was running to Arizona State University to do some work, but she said she'd call me later when she got home. Jen checked in. Putnam, Blaine, Xandar would stay through the days, but then go home as well. My grandparents were getting set up in a hotel and making arrangements for my aunt, who was visiting with my parents and I. During this time, I was also super protective of my parents. I fielded phone call after phone call. Reporters, friends, family. I'd take notes and numbers, give out information for the memorial, and call after call after call after call. I was getting tired. I'd slept a few hours here or there, but in almost 5 days, I'd maybe clocked in 6 or 7 hours total of sleep. I was running on rage, adrenaline, and pure stubbornness, and when the phone rang again, I picked up the phone. Hello, Wentz residence, I answered. Hi there, I was wondering if I could speak to a member of the Wentz family, the man's voice on the other end asked. Yes, hi, I'm Matt, I responded. The big brother, the voice replied. I'm so sorry for your loss and your parents. I was wondering if you had a minute to take down some notes for whenever your parents might need it. Sure, 1 second, I said, grabbing a pen and a notebook. I spun the pen in my left hand and waited. Alrighty, go ahead. My name is Carl, and I was there the night of the accident. My heart jumped. Hi, Carl. Hi. I wanted to let your parents know and you know what I saw. Please do, I'll write it all down. And so he told me what he saw. He'd been coming off the interstate and actually been following the driver of the truck that had killed my sister. He said his driving on the interstate was troublesome, that he'd cut off other drivers and was going at excessive speeds before getting off the highway and onto Pecos Road. He told me the light had turned red well before he made the intersection, and that when the light turned red, Brian had waited before beginning to turn. And then the guy gunned it, Carl said. He wasn't in the intersection at all when it was red, and then he accelerated when it was already red and hit the truck your sister was in. I wrote all this down. Carl said he was a lawyer, that he told the police everything, that there were other witnesses at the scene from different angles. From what I'd gathered, it seems that all the witnesses had corroborated each other to the same conclusion. Carl said he said a prayer for my sister and for Brian and wanted to reach out. I know it may take some time, but if your parents want to talk at any point, please give them my number, he said. I will. Thank you so much, Carl, I replied. He mentioned he'd be at the memorial, and I thanked him for the call again. A fresh surge of adrenaline as we said our goodbyes and hung up, and I took the notebook downstairs. My parents were sitting at the kitchen table with my Aunt Mel. Who was on the phone? My dad asked. A witness, I responded, holding the notebook in my hand. Both my parents looked up. I filled them in on what Carl told me, gave them what I wrote down and his number. They said they would call him, and as the night dragged on, they headed to bed, and Aunt Mel went to her hotel. I went to my room, opened up my computer document I had been working on, and I got back to writing. A screenplay was forming in totality out of my grief, and it was the longest thing I'd ever written up to that point. I turned the radio on and continued writing. I jumped between the screenplay and wrestling matches to write. I stayed there in the dark, journaling, and time continued to pass by. I also pulled out my knife and put it on my desk. And I thought about it. Fuck, did I think about it? I sat there staring at it, and I remembered why I had started in the first place. It was about control. It was like a drug. That adrenaline rush and getting it out. I could feel that itch again. One cut, maybe two. It wouldn't be that bad. It wouldn't be bad. My mom had taken up smoking again after 14 years of quitting to deal with everything, so why can't I start this again? It wouldn't be forever. I can stop at any time. I was still staring at the knife when the phone rang. Another reporter, maybe. And, God, they were calling late. "Hello, Wince residence," I said into the receiver. "Hey, Matt, I'm sorry for calling so late," Meg said. "I'm leaving ASU right now and heading home, okay? I wanted to let you know. I'm going to make something to eat. Have you eaten yet?" "Not yet," I said. "Have you eaten at all today?" she asked. "No," I replied. "I'll be there in like half an hour, okay?" "Yeah, I'll be here," I replied. I hung up the phone, and as I did, listened to the song on the radio. When it ended, I put the unused knife back into my drawer. A little while later, I opened the door to the townhouse and Meg stepped in, and she had food in her hand. We sat at the dining room table eating. She told me about her class project she was working on. We sat and we talked. I told her I'd finished working on the slideshow for Sarah's memorial and asked if she wanted to see it. We watched it together, hand in hand, and once it was done, we cleared the table. I washed the dishes she brought, and she grabbed her purse. "Let me walk you out. Will you call me when you get home to let me know you were there? You got there okay?" I asked. This had now become my default ask of everyone. "I'm not leaving," she replied, and she headed for the stairs. "Meg, it's okay," I responded. "Come on," she said, and up the stairs she went. I followed, and as we got to my room, I closed the door. The music was still playing. She put her bag down, grabbed a pair of sweats out of it. Then she reached into my closet and pulled down a t-shirt. I smiled and stepped out of the room, grabbing a pair of clothes to change into as well. I changed in Sarah's room, looking at the posters and pictures that were still hanging. The picture of her, Meg, Emily, Kate, and Jackie was still in a frame on her desk. The one of me and her at my high school graduation was in a frame hanging on the wall beside her light. When I came out, the door to my room was open and Meg had climbed onto my bed. She made room and motioned for me to join her. "Keep the radio on, or we can watch a movie or something, but either way, you need to lay down," she said. "Meg, don't you need to go home or see Cody?" I asked. "They know where I'm at, and I had lunch with Cody," she responded. "But this is where I want to be." I turned off the light and kept the radio on, climbing into the bed. Meg wrapped her arm around me as she laid her head on my chest and squeezed me 3 times. I squeezed her shoulder 4 times back. Still our signal. I slept the whole night. And when I woke up, she was still there. And the song on the radio when she called? "Someone Saved My Life Tonight" by Elton John. "And may you never love in vain, and in my heart you will remain." Monday, December 8th, 2003, was Sarah Elizabeth Wince's celebration of life. It was done in a way to incorporate a lot of Sarah's different beliefs, being raised in a Christian household, but then her exploration of both Buddhist and Wiccan beliefs all were present and accounted for with readings and prayers and writings. Earl Cooper, my mom's old boss from her time working at a hospital in Yuma, oversaw it. This was important because Sarah had always wanted Earl to perform her wedding so my dad could walk her down the aisle. The drive over was an army of friends. Blaine, Meg, Emily, Putman, Zan, Wendy, Cody, Kate, David, Crystal, Ashley, Gabby, Jen, Jackie, Kelsey, and others all made their way there together. In order to get to the church, though, we had to pass the accident site. Now, signs saying "Slow down for Sarah" and "Yellow roses," her favorite, and assorted squirrel stuffed animals, her favorite animal, were now hung or placed by the fence. When we got to the church, it began to quickly fill, and the brother corps and I just watched everyone file in. One thing we wanted was that everyone should be comfortable, and this wasn't a funeral, it was a celebration. We didn't want a room full of black. I wore a pair of jeans and a sweater. The choir took our spot and sat waiting. When it came our time, Wendy stepped to the front and the choir stood. Wendy gave me a nod and I stepped off my spot on the back riser, standing there, surrounded by Blaine, David, Zan, and Putman. The third row was Corey, David D., John, and other tenors. I passed by Francesca, Crystal, Kelsey, Jackie, Diana, and others in the second row, and stood just in front of the front row, with Meg, Emily, and Kate standing beside me. One of Sarah's and my friends from choir, Jenny M., played piano. As the song started, Wendy and I sang together. Wendy is a classical singer, and with her powerful and rich voice, she carries it. I am a broken-hearted rock-singing big brother who was always really good at being a backup singer. We sing the first verse together, her and me, and it is perfect for what it is, what it needed to be. It is the best duet I've ever done. As we came to the end of the verse, she looked over at me and we exchanged a smile, and I returned back to my spot as the choir came in. On the recording, Wendy and my duet is captured, but all the rest of the audio, the choir portion, is just weirdly drowned out by microphone static up until the last two lines. But the recording of the song isn't important. It's the visual and the memory. With the final notes, some wiped tears from their eyes. Meg looked back at me, and as the choir took their seats, I walked out and back to the corner of the room where I would be in charge of playing the slideshow I created. My grandfather would tell a few story and a few more words would be said. I played the slideshow to an acoustic version of Rod Stewart's Forever Young, because that's how I was going to remember her. Us running through the sprinklers in a backyard or playing superhero and princess. Our time in years of dance together and her laughing that I'd have to wear makeup, but then always wanting to make sure we had photos together. Of being tag team wrestlers and her leaping out of the couch with her butt smash. Her slamming doors when she was furious and standing up for animals all of the time. Our debates between Hanson and Aria Speedwagon, or her telling Brian to brush his teeth before kissing her if he ate meat. Getting angry at me sometimes and slapping me and then realizing she'd screwed up when I'd stand up straight telling her she had one more free one before I may slap back, even though I never did. Watching her decorate the house for Christmas the day after Thanksgiving and then staying up late with her on Christmas Eve or waking up with her before the sun rose on Christmas Day. We may not have necessarily said it, but beyond being siblings, we were friends. And if someone ever crossed one, the other had their back. And I sang. Not too loud, and not to anyone but her. But I sang, because the song would always be hers, and wherever she was, I hoped she heard it. And she knew what that song would always mean. From me to her. A big brother to a little sister. Of how proud of her I always was, and how much I love her. When the slideshow was over, I looked up and noticed Emily's parents standing against the wall, closest to me, both looking at me with a smile. I nodded, smiled back, and her mom gave me a hug. At the end of the service, I started to notice all the people who were there. Sarah's preschool friends, assorted teachers from Mountain Point, co-workers from Fry's, people standing out in the lobby. Pam, Katie, Becky, Mike G, and Scott from choir had come. Everyone was hugging and chatting, and I made my rounds. My parents, grandparents, and aunt all grouped together, and Wendy and I made our way to them. You sang together, my dad said, smiling. Alright. Insert a cut here. You sang together, my dad said, smiling. For Sarah, I replied. Thank you, my mom said to Wendy. Of course, Wendy responded. We all chatted a little bit more, and then my parents began to make the rounds to choir people. I spoke with co-workers, and at one point Crystal mentioned that her parents were getting food and all the choir people and high school friends were welcome. Another great example of the home base that Crystal's house and parents had become to our group at times. We will see you at home whenever you get there. No rush, my mom said. We will handle things here. Thank you for doing everything you did. Now go be with your friends. Are you sure? I asked. Go, she said. Her and Dad gave me a hug. We love you. I love you too. The singers and others from choir who knew Sarah would end up going to Crystal's for a bit. Wendy even joined for a while before heading out. As I walked her out, I thanked her again and we hugged. What she did, from coming back to direct the choir to singing with me, always meant the world to me. I can look back now with a bit more adult knowledge and experience and know she truly was my favorite teacher in high school and beyond. Whether I knew it then or wanted to admit it, she certainly shaped a bit of who I would become. As the night wore on, it became more of a very core group that hung out at Crystal's, and Blaine pulled me aside as we began to settle into movies and just hanging out. Your mom mentioned Sarah and her squirrels, he said. She wanted to get a tattoo? Yeah, I said. Of a fairy holding a squirrel, Blaine responded. Yeah. Wouldn't be a bad one, he said. Maybe not the fairy, but the squirrel? I asked. I'd do that in a heartbeat. I know a guy at Club Tattoo, Blaine said. Let's find some art. So, Blaine and I ran to the computer and began looking on the internet. After a little while, we found a picture and I nodded. That's it, I said. Blaine printed off the picture and pulled out his cell phone, dialing. A bit of a back and forth, and then Blaine got into the details. Okay, when are you free? Blaine asked. Couple of days? That should work. Okay, color? Yeah. I'll bring the pictures by tomorrow. Yeah, 2 appointments. Okay, thanks, man. Bye. Blaine hung up the phone, and I looked at him. We're good, he said. Why'd you make 2 appointments? I asked. She was your sister. You are my brother. That's why, he responded. Zan and Putman came in, hearing us talk. What's going on? Putman asked. We found a tattoo idea online for Sarah, Blaine said. Blaine made an appointment for me, and he's going to get it too, I added. Zan, and Putman looked at the picture. "Make another appointment," Zan declared. "2 more," Putman added. "Guys," I said. "We're family." Zan, pretty definitive in his declaration. My brothers gave me a hug and I thanked them. It got around the party quickly what was happening, and Gabby, Crystal, Meg, Cody, Ashley, and Jen all agreed to come along as support. At the end of the night, we'd all come to an agreement. The brother corps would all be getting a squirrel tattoo, with each of us adding something a little special for each one of us. And then, like every good idea that a 19-year-old and his friends make and think that it's the best one ever, my parents found out. My mom was tattoo appointment number 5. The artist at the shop, aside from being Blaine's friend, also had heard of Sarah's accident and was happy to tattoo us all, with Mom going first. We watched movies in the lobby, got things to eat and drink from surrounding shops. When I got mine, Meg sat in with me as Jen and Ashley popped in at times to give support. When done, I showed it off to the group in the lobby. "That's badass," Cody said. "Does he have a little blue lightning bolt tattooed on his leg?" Ashley asked. "His name is Thunder," I said, including a bit of nod to Kid Cage on my tattoo. I smiled, remembering one of Sarah's favorite shirts. "I talk to squirrels. Chiku, chiku, chiku." Gabby got a little dolphin, a bit of her own tribute, and when we were all done, the 4 of us in the brother corps and my mom had our squirrels. For Sarah. My teenage years would end a few short months later. Those formative years of making some of the greatest friends and knowing some of the best people, finding and creating a wonderful family. And going forward, I was determined to be exactly what I wanted to be. A lovable, maybe not such a loser. Always trying to be there if someone needed me. A loving brother, son, and friend. A good person. I would do my best to leave the angst behind me. The love, though, and Sarah's squirrel, I take with me every day. And when you finally fly away, I'll be hoping that I served you well. For all the wisdom of a lifetime, no one can ever tell. But whatever road you choose, I'm right behind you, win or lose, forever young. Rod Stewart's Forever Young. For Sarah.